Cleopatra VII Philopator was the last active pharaoh of ancient Egypt. She ruled from 51 to 30 BC, during a civil war between the Roman Republic and the Ptolemaic Kingdom. Cleopatra was a charismatic and intelligent ruler who was fluent in several languages, including Greek, Egyptian, and Latin. She was also a skilled diplomat and negotiator, and she used her political skills to great effect in her dealings with the Romans. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC to Ptolemy XII Auletes and Cleopatra V Tryphonina. She was the seventh of 8 children born to the couple. Cleopatra's father was a weak and unpopular ruler, and he was eventually forced to flee Egypt in 58 BC. Cleopatra and her sister Arsinoe VII ruled Egypt in his absence, but they were eventually overthrown by their younger brother Ptolemy XIII. Cleopatra returned to Egypt in 48 BC, and she quickly became involved in a power struggle with her brother. She sought the help of Julius Caesar, who was then in Egypt. Caesar and Cleopatra became lovers, and they eventually defeated Ptolemy XIII in battle. Cleopatra and Caesar then ruled Egypt together for several years. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, another powerful Roman general. Antony and Cleopatra had a son together, Ptolemy Caesar Philopator 15. However, their relationship eventually soured, and they were defeated by Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. After their defeat, Cleopatra and Antony fled to Egypt. They both committed suicide in 30 BC, rather than be captured by Octavian. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Roman rule in Egypt. Cleopatra is one of the most famous women in history. She has been portrayed in numerous books, plays, and movies. She is often seen as a symbol of beauty, power, and seduction. However, Cleopatra was also a skilled diplomat and ruler. She was able to maintain Egypt's independence for many years, despite the growing power of Rome. Cleopatra's legacy continues to fascinate people today. She is a complex and fascinating figure, and her story is one of love, power, and tragedy. Life and reign. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC to Ptolemy XII Auletes and Cleopatra V Tryphonina. She was the seventh of 8 children born to the couple. Cleopatra's father was a weak and unpopular ruler, and he was eventually forced to flee Egypt in 58 BC. Cleopatra and her sister Arsinoe VII ruled Egypt in his absence, but they were eventually overthrown by their younger brother Ptolemy XIII. Cleopatra returned to Egypt in 48 BC, and she quickly became involved in a power struggle with her brother. She sought the help of Julius Caesar, who was then in Egypt. Caesar and Cleopatra became lovers, and they eventually defeated Ptolemy XIII in battle. Cleopatra and Caesar then ruled Egypt together for several years. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, another powerful Roman general. Antony and Cleopatra had a son together, Ptolemy Caesar Philopator 15. However, their relationship eventually soured, and they were defeated by Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. After their defeat, Cleopatra and Antony fled to Egypt. They both committed suicide in 30 BC, rather than be captured by Octavian. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Roman rule in Egypt. Cleopatra was a complex and fascinating figure. She was a brilliant and resourceful leader, but she was also capable of great ruthlessness. She was a master of political intrigue, and she used her beauty and charm to great effect. Cleopatra's legacy continues to fascinate people today, and she remains one of the most iconic figures in history. Cleopatra was the last active pharaoh of ancient Egypt. She ruled from 51 to 30 BC, during a civil war between the Roman Republic and the Ptolemaic Kingdom. Cleopatra was a charismatic and intelligent ruler who was fluent in several languages, including Greek, Egyptian, and Latin. She was also a skilled diplomat and negotiator, and she used her political skills to great effect in her dealings with the Romans. Cleopatra's legacy is a complex one. She is often seen as a symbol of beauty, power, and seduction. However, she was also a skilled diplomat and ruler. She was able to maintain Egypt's independence for many years, despite the growing power of Rome. Cleopatra's death in 30 BC marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Roman rule in Egypt. However, her legacy continues to fascinate people today. She is a complex and fascinating figure, and her story is one of love, power, and tragedy. There are many aspects of Cleopatra's legacy that are worth discussing. For example, she was a strong and independent woman who ruled Egypt at a time when women were not often given positions of power. She was also a skilled diplomat and negotiator who was able to maintain Egypt's independence for many years. However, Cleopatra's legacy is also tarnished by her association with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Both of these men were powerful Roman generals who were involved in a civil war. Cleopatra's relationship with these men ultimately led to her downfall. Despite her tragic end, Cleopatra's legacy continues to fascinate people today. She is a complex and fascinating figure, and her story is one of love, power, and tragedy. Cleopatra's love life. The story of how Cleopatra met Julius Caesar. When Cleopatra was 21 years old, she met Julius Caesar, who was then the Roman governor of Gaul. Caesar was immediately smitten with Cleopatra's beauty and intelligence, and they began a secret affair. One night, Cleopatra smuggled herself into Caesar's quarters in a rolled-up carpet. This story has been told and retold for centuries, and it is one of the most famous stories about Cleopatra. The story goes that Cleopatra was disguised as a servant girl when she arrived at Caesar's quarters. She was rolled up in a carpet, and she was carried into Caesar's room by 2 of his guards. When the carpet was unrolled, Cleopatra revealed herself to Caesar, and he was immediately captivated by her beauty. The 2 of them began a passionate affair, and they soon became political allies. Caesar helped Cleopatra to regain her throne in Egypt, and she helped him to consolidate his power in Rome. Their relationship was controversial, but it was also one of the most powerful political alliances of the ancient world. This story is a reminder of Cleopatra's beauty, her intelligence, and her political savvy. She was a master of seduction, and she used her beauty to great effect in her dealings with men. She was also a skilled diplomat, and she was able to use her relationship with Caesar to benefit Egypt. This story is also a reminder of the power of love. Cleopatra and Caesar were deeply in love, and their relationship was one of the most passionate and intense in history. Their love was also a source of great strength for both of them, and it helped them to achieve great things. The last days of Cleopatra. Cleopatra, the last active pharaoh of ancient Egypt, died on August 12, 30 BC. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Roman rule in Egypt. Cleopatra's final days were spent in Alexandria, Egypt. She had been defeated by Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian was now marching on Alexandria, and Cleopatra knew that she would be captured and taken to Rome to be paraded as a prisoner. Rather than face this fate, Cleopatra chose to commit suicide. She had a number of ways to do this, but she chose to die by the bite of an asp, a venomous snake. The story of Cleopatra's death is shrouded in mystery. Some accounts say that she was bitten by the asp while she was in her bath. Others say that she held the snake in her arms and allowed it to bite her. Whatever the method, Cleopatra's death was a dramatic end to a remarkable life. She was a brilliant and resourceful ruler who was able to maintain Egypt's independence for many years, despite the growing power of Rome. She was also a skilled diplomat and negotiator, and she used her beauty and charm to great effect. Cleopatra's legacy continues to fascinate people today. She is often seen as a symbol of beauty, power, and seduction. However, Cleopatra was also a complex and fascinating figure. She was a master of political intrigue, and she used her beauty and charm to great effect. Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era, but her story continues to be told and retold. She is one of the most famous women in history, and her legend is likely to live on for many years to come. Interesting stories about Cleopatra. The story of how Cleopatra met Julius Caesar. When Cleopatra was 21 years old, she met Julius Caesar, who was then the Roman governor of Gaul. Caesar was immediately smitten with Cleopatra's beauty and intelligence, and they began a secret affair. One night, Cleopatra smuggled herself into Caesar's quarters in a rolled-up carpet. This story has been told and retold for centuries, and it is one of the most famous stories about Cleopatra. The story of Cleopatra's barge at the Battle of Actium. In 31 BC, Cleopatra and Mark Antony fought a decisive battle against Octavian at Actium. Cleopatra's fleet was outnumbered, but she decided to fight anyway. She sailed her barge into battle, dressed in her finest clothes and jewels. She was said to be so beautiful that the Roman soldiers were mesmerized, and they lost their focus on the battle. This story is a reminder of Cleopatra's power of seduction, and it is one of the most iconic images of her. The story of Cleopatra's suicide. After her defeat at Actium, Cleopatra fled to Egypt with Mark Antony. They both knew that they would be captured and executed by Octavian, so they decided to commit suicide. Cleopatra is said to have killed herself by allowing an asp to bite her. This story is a tragic one, but it is also a reminder of Cleopatra's strength and determination. These are just a few of the many interesting stories about Cleopatra. She was a complex and fascinating figure, and her life is full of drama and intrigue.
Childhood of Princess Elizabeth. Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born on April 21, 1926, at 2:40 a.m. at 17 Bruton Street in Mayfair, London. She was the first child of Prince Albert, Duke of York, later King George VI, and his wife, Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, later Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother. Her father was the second son of King George V and Queen Mary, and her mother was the youngest daughter of Scottish aristocrat Claude Bowes-Lyon, 14th Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn. Elizabeth and her younger sister, Margaret Rose, spent their early childhood in a large house in London called 145 Piccadilly. They did not go to school like other children, but were taught at home by a governess, Marion Crawford. The governess, known as Crawfie, taught the girls reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and music. She also taught them about the royal family and their duties. Elizabeth and Margaret loved to play games, ride horses, and go swimming.
Princess
They also
had
enjoyed
turned
visiting
18.
their grandparents,
Her teenage
King
years
George
had been
V
against the
and
backdrop
Queen
of the
Mary
Second World
at
War.
Buckingham Palace.
Elizabeth was determined to do
In
her bit for the
1936,
war effort.
Elizabeth's uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated the throne to marry American divorce E. Wallace Simpson. This made Elizabeth's father king, and she became the heir presumptive. Elizabeth's life changed dramatically after her father became king. She began to undertake public duties, such as visiting hospitals and schools. She also learned about the government and how to run the monarchy. Elizabeth and Margaret were evacuated from London to Windsor Castle during World War II. They continued their studies and also did their part to help the war effort. Elizabeth joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, a TS, where she learned how to drive and repair cars. After the war, Elizabeth continued her education and traveled extensively. She also began to prepare for her role as queen. In 1947, she married Philip Mountbatten, a former Prince of Greece and Denmark. They had 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. Elizabeth was crowned Queen on June 2, 1953. She has reigned for over 70 years, making her the longest reigning British monarch in history. She is also the longest reigning queen regnant in world history. Elizabeth has been a symbol of stability and continuity for the British people throughout her reign. She has also been a strong advocate for the Commonwealth of Nations. She is a popular and respected figure around the world. Elizabeth II's childhood was a happy one, despite the challenges of the times. She was loved and supported by her family, and she was prepared for her future role as queen. Her young life. Like many other young people in Britain, she was eager to do her part to help the war effort. In 1942, she turned 18 and was granted permission by her father, King George VI, to join the Auxiliary Territorial Service, ATS, the women's branch of the British Army. Elizabeth trained as a driver and mechanic at the ATSU No. 1 Mechanical Training Center in Camberley, Surrey. She learned how to drive and maintain a variety of vehicles, including trucks, jeeps, and ambulances. She also received training in first aid and map reading. After completing her training, Elizabeth was assigned to the First Aid Post Pool, where she drove ambulances and provided medical assistance to injured soldiers. She also worked as a mechanic, repairing vehicles that had been damaged in battle. Elizabeth served in the ATS for 2 years, until the end of the war in 1945. She was promoted to the rank of junior commander, the equivalent of captain. Her service in the ATS was a source of great pride, and she often spoke about it in later years. Elizabeth's time in the army helped her to develop a strong sense of duty and discipline. It also gave her a first-hand experience of the hardships and sacrifices that people make during wartime. These experiences would stay with her throughout her life and would inform her approach to her role as queen. After the war, Elizabeth served in the British Army as an honorary colonel of several regiments. She also remained a strong supporter of the armed forces, and she has visited troops on many occasions. Elizabeth II's service in the army is a testament to her courage, determination, and sense of duty. She is the only British monarch to have served in the armed forces during wartime, and her example has inspired generations of young people. Her throne. On February 6, 1952, Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was on an official tour of Kenya with her husband, Prince Philip, when she received the news that her father, King George VI, had died. She was just 25 years old at the time. Elizabeth immediately returned to London and was proclaimed queen by her Privy and Executive Councils. She was crowned at Westminster Abbey on June 2, 1953, in a ceremony that was watched by millions of people around the world. Elizabeth's accession to the throne came at a time of great change and uncertainty. The world was still reeling from the effects of World War II, and the Cold War was just beginning. Elizabeth's youth and inexperience made her a somewhat controversial choice for the Queen, but she quickly proved herself to be a capable and dedicated leader. Over the next 70 years, Elizabeth II reigned through many challenges, including the decolonization of Africa, the troubles in Northern Ireland, and the rise of the European Union. She has also witnessed the changing role of the monarchy in modern society. Through it all, Elizabeth has remained a popular and respected figure. She is seen as a symbol of stability and continuity for the British people, and she has been a strong advocate for the Commonwealth of Nations. Elizabeth II's accession to the throne was a momentous event that changed the course of British history. She is a truly remarkable woman, and her legacy will be remembered for generations to come. Elizabeth's accession to the throne was a major event in British history. She was the first female monarch to rule the country since Queen Victoria, and she was also the youngest person to ever become queen. Her reign has been marked by many challenges, but she has remained a popular and respected figure throughout. Her political environment. Queen Elizabeth. I was a constitutional monarch, which means that she did not have any direct political power. However, she did have a significant influence on British politics through her weekly meetings with the Prime Minister and her other interactions with government officials. Elizabeth was always careful to remain above party politics, but she did have her own political views. She was a conservative, and she was generally supportive of the policies of the Conservative Party. However, she was also willing to challenge the government when she felt it was necessary. For example, in 1981, Elizabeth refused to consent to the government's plan to introduce a bill that would have made it more difficult for people to divorce. The government eventually dropped the bill. Elizabeth also played a role in mediating political disputes. In 1998, she helped to bring about the Good Friday Agreement, which brought an end to the conflict in Northern Ireland. Elizabeth's political influence was not always direct. She was also a symbol of national unity and stability, and she helped to legitimize the governments of the Thos Adi. She was a popular and respected figure, and her presence helped to reassure the British people during times of political uncertainty. One of the most famous examples of Elizabeth's political influence was her reaction to the death of Princess Diana in 1997. Diana was a popular figure, and her death caused widespread public grief. Elizabeth was initially criticized for her muted reaction to the death, but she later gave a televised speech in which she expressed her own sadness and paid tribute to Diana.
Now, as your queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her two boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered.
The speech was widely praised, and it helped to restore public confidence in the monarchy. Elizabeth I's political side was often subtle and indirect, but it was nonetheless significant. She was a wise and experienced leader, and she played a vital role in British politics for over 70 years. In addition to her political influence, Elizabeth was also a strong advocate for the Commonwealth of Nations. She visited many Commonwealth countries during her reign, and she helped to promote cooperation and understanding between them. She was also a patron of many charities and organizations, and she used her position to raise awareness of important issues such as poverty and disease. Elizabeth I was a remarkable woman who dedicated her life to serving her country and the Commonwealth. She was a symbol of stability and continuity, and she will be remembered as one of the greatest British monarchs of all time. As for the question of who Queen Elizabeth was jealous of, there is no definitive answer. However, there is some speculation that she may have been jealous of Jackie Kennedy, the wife of U.S. President John F. Kennedy. Kennedy was a glamorous and popular figure, and she received a lot of attention from the media. Elizabeth was reportedly annoyed by Kennedy's fawning attention, and she may have felt she was not getting the same level of respect. Of course, this is just speculation. It is also possible that Elizabeth was not jealous of Kennedy at all. She was a very private person, and she may not have been concerned with the attention that Kennedy received. Ultimately, only Elizabeth herself knew how she felt about Jackie Kennedy. Queen Elizabeth I's last days. Queen Elizabeth I passed away peacefully on September 8, 2023, at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. She was 96 years old. The Queen had been in declining health for several months, and she had been forced to cancel a number of public engagements in recent weeks. She had also been hospitalized twice in the past year. In her final days, the Queen was surrounded by her family, including her husband, Prince Philip, who died in April 2022, and her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She was also visited by her Prime Minister, Liz Truss. The Queen died at 3:10 p.m. local time. Her death was announced by Buckingham Palace, which said that she had peacefully passed away. The Queen's death triggered a period of national mourning in the United Kingdom. Flags were flown at half-mast, and public events were cancelled. The Queen's funeral was held on September 12 at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. It was attended by members of the royal family, world leaders, and thousands of ordinary people. The Queen's death marked the end of an era. She had been the longest reigning British monarch in history, and she had served her country for over 70 years. She was a symbol of stability and continuity for the British people, and her death was a major loss for the country. The Queen's legacy will be long-lasting. She was a wise and compassionate leader who dedicated her life to serving her country. She will be remembered as one of the most important figures in British history. The Queen's death was a significant event in British history. She was a beloved figure who had served her country for over 70 years. Her legacy will be long-lasting, and she will be remembered as one of the most important figures in British history.